Okay. Okay, we are proceeding with our next session, and the first speaker is Irena Cirovic from the Belgrade University. The title of her paper is Exploring Church Art Through Archives, Insights from the Archival Collection of the Princess Ljubica Society.
Thank you, and first of all, to thank you once again for this another excellent conference and to be here. So I will speak today about my ongoing research, which focuses on the archival materials of one of the Serbian women's associations, officially named Committee of Ladies, Princess Ljubica. So this organization was active from the very end of the 19th century until World War II, and was among women's civic associations that characterized Serbian society at that time. So several such associations operated in Serbia, and all of them was characterized by primarily engaged in humanitarian and educational work. And also, it is important to emphasize, all of them was very much marked by national patriotic orientation. And this national framework was particularly emphasized in the case of Princess Ljubica Society. So, it was founded in 1899 and named in honor of Princess Ljubica, who was the first princess of 19th century liberated Serbia. The main initiator and first president of the society was Mileva Vulović, who was the former headmistress of women's high school, and who was inspired to establish this organization after her travels to Kosovo. And from the beginnings, the society's primary mission was to support Serbian churches in regions still under the Ottoman Empire, and what is today southern Serbia, Kosovo and Metohija, northern Macedonia, or we can say that time the Raška-Prizren diocese and the Metropolitanate of Skopje. Thus, churches were placed at the center of its activities, regarded as the fundamental pillars of support for the Serbian people. This humanitarian focus remained a constant throughout the society's existence up until its end in 1941. And the society adapted its activities during the war times, including the Balkan Wars and World War I, shifting its effort toward hospital work and taking care of the wounded. And after 1911, one might have expected the society's original mission to lose relevance, as the territories it had supported were now part of the newly reorganized state, or the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. But however, while its work increasingly expanded into cultural and educational activities, the society remained committed to aiding the Orthodox clergy and church institutions. Additionally, it extended its effort to new regions, such as, just to name Dalmatia. It is one of these regions that came into the focus of the society in their mission to preserve orthodoxy. The society's deep ties to orthodoxy and patriotism were also embodied in two churches that society built as its endowment, and both were dedicated to Archangel Michael, who was the patron saint of the society, and both served as memorial churches to the fallen soldiers. So the first one was in Štimlje, constructed in 1913 or 14, following the Balkan Wars, and the second one was built in Deligrad in 1935. And also I mentioned that it was dedicated to fallen soldiers of the first Serbian uprising and from the Serbian-Ottoman Wars. From its founding, the Committee of Ladies worked to expand its network. So through its trustees, it established subcommittees of the society throughout Serbia, and the number of these subcommittees varied through the years, but it was always around 30. And most were formed in the southern part of Serbia, creating actually some kind of base for active work across the border. The society held an annual meeting each year and general assembly every 4 years. And I'm mentioning this because these gatherings also served as an opportunity to make very visible and very public their work. So by in serving of that, they published reports on their work. So by 1911, the committee had published 3 commemorative books, or spomenica, and additionally in 1939, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary, another spomenica was published. And all this publication was very valuable sources, as they have published records of society works and lists of members and donors and financial reports, and most importantly, the detailed inventories of items sent to churches. And I will present just an example from the first commemorative book, which provides an overview of the donation made during the first 4 years of the work. And I just put like an excerpt on the side, only the first 15 items. And as a point, just because it is a small picture, but it must be said that it concentrated on their work in the diocese of Skopje, Raška Prizren, Debar Veles, and Bitola. And as a comparison, this can be supplemented with the society final activity report from 1939. And viewed together, these records reveal that the gift to churches encompassed all types of ecclesiastical items. So priestly vestments, liturgical vessels, books, icons, iconostases, polyeles, church bells, etc. So taken together, these reports demonstrate that the work of Princess Ljubica Society led to a significant influx of church items into the specified regions, and so the extensive number, as you can see, of these donated items underscores that the society's work should be regarded as an important transfer of religious objects in consequence. And from this perspective, I sought to draw attention to the preserved archive of this society and its potential as a valuable resource for the research of church art. So, unlike archives of other women's society, this one which were destroyed during wars. This one survived thanks to the efforts of the last president of the society. And the material is kept in the historical archives of Belgrade and constitute quite a substantial collection. And through this archive, it certainly allows to almost completely reconstruct the society work, but here I will highlight only a few aspects, primarily concerning the society's early years up until 1912. And it can be said that one of the first initiatives following its establishment was to make connection with both state and church institutions. And given the national policy directed toward the southern region, this institution aligned with the society's goals, so providing it with the support to organize distributional networks. And the primary channel of communication was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, especially Serbian consuls in Pristina and Skopje. And another key institution was the Skopje Metropolitanate, led by Metropolitan Firmilian. It must be said that he was the first Serb to hold this position until 1903. And priests, teachers, and epitrophs often sent their requests for the aid for their churches through the Skopje Metropolitanate, but it also served as a distributional channel for church donations. And it is interesting from these early years of the committee works that documents that relate to the organization of aid. And we have from 1902 two lists that were sent to the committee for their needs. So the first was a register of churches and monasteries in Raška-Prizren diocese. It was supposedly compiled by the rector of the theological seminary in Prizren, and this list provided the names of 98 churches categorized by protopresbyterites: Prizren, Grnjilane, Priština, Vučitrne, etc. And a similar list of church and monasteries from the Skopje diocese was sent, and it was signed by the Metropolitan Firmilian of Skopje, detailing 74 churches across districts or kazas: Skopje, Preševo, Kratovo, Tetovo, Gostivar, and Kumanovo, but with the note that the Kočani and Kriva Palanka kaza were not included as they had not yet been visited. And this document is particularly interesting as a record of the churches in Metropolitan during the period of ecclesiastical schism, or a division between the supporters of exarchate and patriarchate, or exarchisti, patriarchisti. And also from its inception until 1911, the society maintained a journal of received and issued items. And these entries provide clear insight into the mechanism of item acquisitions and distribution. So we can see from that the individual donors played a crucial role, not only by monetary donations, but also with the specific religious items. And these records often trace the journey of these donated items from the donor to the one designated church. And for example, I just put here donation from Savka Subotic, and I must say that she was one of the prominent figure in women's activism, and her donation included Polyele, an icon of Saint Elizabeth, and one cloth, and all the icons appeared in the list of gifts sent to the Church of Saint Sava in Thessaloniki, or Hilandar Metohija, and were delivered by the Serbian General Consul Pavle Denić. The society also used its financial resources to purchase necessary items, primarily from two trade shops, and this is important to find because it is significant for identifying the origin of and provenance of certain objects. And one of them was a specialized store, Jovan Gagić from Belgrade, founded in 1863. And the other, frequently mentioned in purchase records, was the store of Marković and Pavlović, which established itself also in Belgrade as one of the main suppliers of priestly investments and church items. And this shop primarily imported goods from Russia and objects recognizable by the craftsmanship in this contemporary Russian Byzantine style. Also, an illustrative example of such purchases is a significant order made by the society in 1803. And from Jovan Gagic's shop, the society acquired a variety of priestly vestments and liturgical veils, while from Markovic and Pavlovic, it purchased candlesticks, tripidions, a cross, and a censer, and all of this was immediately sent to the Church of the Holy Trinity in Kumanovo, which had just been built at the time. And it is also important to note that some church artifacts were transferred through the society from Serbian churches, mainly in Belgrade, which donated items from their own inventories. And for example, record shows that Ružica Church in Belgrade donated polyele in 1901, which was sent to a church in Ferizović, or modern day in Uroševac. And similarly, the Ascension Church in Belgrade donated polyele in 1899, and then 23 icons and 1 plaštanica in 1912. But I still didn't find records where it was sent. And among these inter-church transfers, some stood out as significant donations. And one notable case occurred during the interwar activities of society in Dalmatia. The society was involved in the construction of the Church of St. Peter and Paul in Sinj in 1928. They donated funds for the construction and also provided an iconostasis, icons, and the church bell. And the iconostases were partially the work of Russian emigrant painter Boris Selyanko, whom the society personally commissioned to install it in Sinj. But many of the icons he brought originated from the older iconostases of Saint Natalia Church or Chapel in Belgrade, which was built in 1878. And it was the chapel of the women's high school. And this case is particularly interesting because little is known about St. Natalia Chapel, especially since it was destroyed in the war in 1914. And it has been assumed that the iconostasis was also destroyed. But we see that through the correspondence from the Princess Ljubica Society that parts of it were actually donated to the church in Sinj. And these works were by Polexija Todorović, who were one of the very rare female painters in Serbia in the 19th century, and whose independently created works are rarely preserved. So this makes the icons donated to Sinj even more valuable, as they form the majority of the iconostasis. And also remarkably, the royal icon of Saint Natalia was also retained at its designated position within the iconostasis. I will just go back to the situation within this iconostasis, despite not aligning with the dedication of the church in Sinj. So with this example, I can conclude once again emphasizing that the archive of the Princess Ljubica Society highlights the significant influx of religious artifacts and church artifacts, particularly into the regions of Kosovo, Metohija, and Macedonia, and facilitated by the society effort. So this process can be regarded as one of the major pathways for the transfer of religious artifacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter will be Ovidiu Cristia from Nicolae Iorga Institute of History in Bucharest. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I shall start by expressing my gratitude towards the organizer for this wonderful conference, and special thanks to Margarita Kuyumjeva, who insisted to be present. It is my first presence to this traditional conference organized by Institute of Art History in Sofia, and I am very glad to be a part of this scientific event. So I shall speak about this painter, Hans von Aachen, born in 1552 in Cologne. His patronym belonged to his father, who was a citizen of Aachen. He was a painter who is one of the most important representatives of Northern Mannerism. He was trained in the Netherlandish and the Italian tradition of painting. He was active in Italy from 1574 until 1587. He worked mainly in Venice, but not only. And from 1587, he turned back in Germany. He was in the first years established in Munich, Bavaria. But in 1592, he became an official painter of Emperor Rudolf II. And even he worked in the first year after this appointment still in Munich. From 1601 or 1602, he moved to Prague, where he was commissioned several workings, among them a cycle dedicated to the long Turkish War. I shall present more in a more detailed way something about this major conflict between the Habsburgs and the Ottomans. I shall start by mentioning some weak points of my presentation. The first and probably the most important one concerns a methodological aspect. For various reasons, I didn't have a direct contact with the sources, and I used only copies obtained due to the gratitude of a friend, a German friend, Robert Born, or found on the internet. It is thus a biased analysis, which may have an impact on the conclusion. On the other hand, the drawings and paintings, which I shall discuss, were already analyzed by several scholars. For instance, Mirka Campbell-Fette, who justly pointed out that the allegories dedicated by Hans von Aachen to the long Turkish War organized the specific events of the conflict in order to produce a recollection of the past tailored to Rudolf II political needs. Indeed, the painter and his commissioner proposed a specific interpretation of past events. These are some other allegories dedicated by Hans von Aachen to the conflict with the Turks, but they seem to belong to other series than I shall discuss further. So, as I agree with most of the conclusions of the above-mentioned author, I shall limit my investigation only to 4 representations of the Wallachian involvement in the long Turkish War, who received less interest before. I am aware that doing so I risk separating a part from the whole, but I shall try to counterbalance the fact by keeping in mind the whole cycle of Hans von Aachen concerning the conflict with the Porte. In this respect, I shall underscore that the paintings dedicated by Hans von Aachen to the conflict seem to have been made up of 14 works, of which only 11 survived. The lost 3 works alter obviously any attempt to draw a firm conclusion. Moreover, for some of them, today exist only drawings, as the original paintings have been lost. Thus, we ignore if the sketches preceded or made after the painting, and also if they are either identical or where there were differences. The latter hypothesis seems to be confirmed by some cases in which for the same event survived both the drawing and the picture. For instance, I can show you an image for the conquest of Győr by the Habsburgs in 1595. And here are 2 versions, 2 sketches of the events. There are some minor changes in the background of the image. So there are still several questions on which we have no precise idea how the final cycle was represented. It is usually considered that the long Turkish War started in 1593 after the defeat and the death of Teli Hasan Pasha of Bosnia in the Battle of Shishak. The event enraged the Grand Vizier Sinan Pasha. The Battle of Shishak is represented here. The event enraged the Grand Vizier Kocha Sinan Pasha, but it should be mentioned that there were still room for negotiations. Eventually, the outbreak of the conflict was made inevitable by the rigid position adopted by the Habsburgs, who considered erroneously that the disappearance of Teli Hasan Pasha eliminated a bitter rival and the contentious matter of the Ottomans. The war that followed lasted for 15 years with a single major battle won by the Ottomans, the Battle of Mezio-Kerestesh, and a long list of sieges which have caused a number of towns and fortresses to pass from one hand to another. In parallel, the military clashes were doubled by negotiations, but a diplomatic solution was found only in 1606. The peace concluded at Jitva-Török is considered as a stalemate by modern historians, with no important change in the balance of power. However, the end of wars saw the return of the former allies of the Habsburgs, Transylvania and Wallachia, to their status as tributaries of the Sultan. Moreover, Transylvania, which was the first principality to join the Habsburg camp, ended the conflict as enemy of the imperials. It was not a simple bold-face, but a result of a rigid and somehow unrealistic policy of Rudolf II and his court, which managed to alienate his former allies. Although the conflict coincided with many ups and downs for the Habsburg camp, the paintings commissioned by the Emperor Rudolf II to Hans von Aachen mirror another perspective. It seems that Hans von Aachen's cycle about the Long Turkish War, created sometimes between 1603 and 1606, comprised a total of 14 small paintings commissioned by Rudolf II and kept by the Emperor and his art chamber, Kunstkammer, in fact, a huge space in the imperial palace, who gathered the collection of the Emperor on various things. Only 7 of these 4 paintings, as I already mentioned, survive, but other 4 could be reconstructed based on a set of drawings offered as a gift by the Emperor to the Elector of Saxony, Christian II. The initial destinations of the paintings, Rudolf II's Kunstkammer, would raise a question concerning the collection's purpose and audience. It is already pointed out the works preserved in Kunstkammer were not intended for public or for propaganda, but aimed at a limited circle, mostly for Emperor, his counselors, and sometimes by his important guests and ambassadors present in Prague. There is, however, an indirect link between von Aachen's small paintings and propaganda if you consider that the representations of the events in von Aachen's cycle was based on the news and reports which circulated during that time. The imperial court, as any other political actor involved in the long war, filtered the information and shaped the story about a certain military clash according to its own view. So, von Aachen's cycle is a sort of translation in image of this official view of several events. Moreover, as it was already pointed out, even if these paintings seem to have had a limited audience, replica of them appears to have been distributed either as medals or as drawings to various European courts. And here you can see bronze bas-relief gathering several themes and cliches which are presented also in some paintings painted by Hans von Aachen. It is a work of a Netherlandish, I think, sculptor present in Prague, Adrian de Vries. It was also the case of sketches offered as a gift to the Elector of Saxony, Christian II. Due to this gift, other 4 events could be added to Hans von Aachen's cycle. The apotheosis of Emperor Rudolf II, the conquest of Esztergom, which had a significant importance because Esztergom was the most important archbishopric in Hungary, in the Kingdom of Hungary, in 1595. The Battle of Călugăreni in Wallachia in 1595, also in 1595, and the Battle of Schellenberg in Transylvania in 1599. Excuse me, here. This one. Hans von Aachen produced the works in a context marked on one hand by attempts to put an end to the conflict with the Ottomans and on the other by the troubles of Emperor Rudolf II within his own family, his authority being increasingly challenged by Archduke Matthias. In fact, shortly after the Peace of Jitva-Török in 1606, Rudolf renounced in favor of his brother Matthias to the crowns of Hungary and Bohemia, retaining only the imperial title which gave him only formal authority. Despite this troubled context, or perhaps because of it, Aachen's series of the Habsburg-Ottoman War was intended to present the confrontations as a major military success of Rudolf II's reign. Although only 11 of the alleged 14 works were preserved, it is interesting to take a closer look to the events chosen for the cycle. It seems that the starting point was the triumph of the emperor. We know this because these sketches, which were offered as a gift to the Elector of Saxony, have also a document with a sort of indication what these sketches represented and how should it be interpreted. I shall detail further this aspect. So this is the first image of the cycle, the triumph of the emperor, followed by the battle, the outbreak of the conflict in 1593, the Battle of Sisak in Croatia, won by the Habsburgs, the Battle of Mezőkeresztes, which actually was a defeat, but the artists tried to represent it according to sources on the event as a stalemate or an undecisive victory. There are several elements who point to this conclusion. Also, the conquest of Esztergom in 1595, the recapture of Győr in 1598, the Battle of Călugăreni in 1595, the conquest of Székesfehérvár, another very important city because it was the city where the kings of Hungary were crowned. Also, three other images showing the battles occurred in Transylvania at Schellenberg, Guruslav, and Brasov. While we ignore what other three events were depicted in the lost works, it is interesting to note that the selection includes a defeat, Mezőkeresztes, overlooks other painful setbacks, the fall of Győr in 1594, Eger in 1596, or the again loss of Székesfehérvár in 1602, and the repeated failures to conquer Buda, and includes a number of successes in which either the imperial troops were not involved at all, or their participation was not decisive. In this respect, it is striking to see that no less than 4 paintings and drawings concerned battles led by Wallachian princes Michael the Brave and Radu Șerban. To be sure, Wallachia was at the time involved in the anti-Ottoman war, and after the Treaty of Târgoviște, signed in 1598, an ally of the Emperor Rudolf II, but a closer look to the Hans von Aachen works shows that the Wallachian involvement is only alluded to and not from a favorable perspective. It is certain that von Aachen works tell a story about the war, a tale in which the double-headed eagle seemed to dominate both its enemies and its allies. Every single piece is an allegory based on what was considered significant about a certain event and how the imperial court interpreted it. Also, the artist chose to frequently use some figures and themes, a recurrent strategy aimed to strengthen the idea of victory. It is somehow surprising that a series expected to illustrate the confrontations with the infidels included no less than 3 paintings in which the enemies were the Transylvanians. It is a sort of illustration of an idea expressed by some political actors in the Long Turkish War, according to whom some Christians, namely the bad Christians, are even worse than the infidels. Thus, the military operations in Hungary were put together with the confrontations on Lower Danube and Transylvania, offering a sort of global image on the Long Turkish War. In this general perspective, 4 events related to the Wallachian and 3 with Transylvania history were figured by an official artist of the emperor. It is worth noting that with the exception of the work of the Battle of Brasov, this one, which closed the series, the other 3 images follow the general logic in which the cycle was conceived. A foreground in which are synthesized the key aspect of the event, a background which represents the battle, and the celestial plane in which divinities, angels, or imperial symbols, the double-headed eagle or the Capricorn, mirror the confrontations on earth. The sketch representing the Battle of Călugăreni in 1595 shows the Grand Vizier Sinan Pasha falling from a bridge under the vigorous charge of the imperial cavalrymen. The idea was aimed to provoke a strong visual impact as a general falling from his horse was associated with the defeat. It is probable that Hans von Aachen or his commissioner picked up one of the most persistent news circulating in 1595 after the battle. In addition to the false report of the capture of the Prophet Green Flag, the news of the Grand Vizier fall from the bridge was widespread. However, a short note accompanying the drawing Sinan Basa Fugatus in Istum Proiectus opened the way for other interpretation. It's hard to say whether the scene was a confusion in the news that the Battle of Nașlov River took place on a bridge built on by the Ottomans across the Danube, or whether it was a fusion between the Battle of Călugăreni and the Battle of Giurgiu, which put an end to the campaign. The drawing is focused on the moment when the Grand Vizier, put to flight by spear-wielding horsemen, fall into the water with his horse, while in the background, the Ottoman troops retreat hastily. Sinan Pasha posture was some similarities with the fall of an Ottoman horseman in the background of the painting illustrating the Battle of Shishak, for instance. There are also other similarities. In the foreground, Hans von Aachen seems to have taken a water deity from a previous painting illustrating the clash in Croatia, while one of the Christian horsemen bears resemblance to the Wallachian horseman portrayed by the Flemish engraver Abraham de Bruyn in Diversarum Gentium Armatura Equestris. The goddess of victory, or an angel, seems to encourage the Christian troops to pursue their enemies. A possible allusion to the overall outcome of the Ottoman campaign in Wallachia, which was deplored by the Ottoman chronicles as a disgraceful failure. Although the victory had been cleared at the time by the Transylvanian Prince Sigismund Báthory, von Aachen painting suggests that it was a victory of Rudolf II troops, a fact also suggested by the standard with double-headed eagle beared by the Christian soldiers. And here, again, it's a similarity with the Battle of Shishak. This flag dominated the one side of the painting. Not in the least, it can't be discarded the possibility that the painter concentrated which similarities is striking, but it's also the possibility that the painter concentrated on the main scene of the battle and filled the rest with already well-established cliché. It is also interesting to note that in chronological terms, the drawing does not follow the capture of Esztergom as would have been natural, but is placed after the recapture of Győr in 1598. Another chronological inadvertence placed the Battle of Schellimber after the conquest of Székesfehérvár in 1601. At Schellimber, an invading army from Wallachia defeated the Transylvanian troops led by Prince Cardinal Andrew Báthory, a pro-Ottoman and pro-Polish prince, which intended to abandon the war against the Porte. The conflicts shocked the Papal Curia not only because it led to a Christian bloodshed, but also because a high hierarch of the church was assassinated and decapitated soon after the battle. At that moment, Rudolf II adopted the justification of Michael the Brave, stating that Andrew Báthory's actions were harmful for the interest of the Christendom, and that neither the imperial court nor the Wallachian prince were to blame for the cardinal tragic end. A few years later, Hans von Aachen depicted the battle, but the official discourse had some significant changes. As in the case of the Battle of the Călugăreni, the sketch preserved in Dresden bears a Latin inscription which is a sort of clue for any attempt of interpretation. Dacia fornicata adentibus liberata. The text is an allusion to Báthory's family coat of arms representing some fangs. While the unflattering epithet accompanying Dacia, i.e. Transylvania, may be a reference to the innumerable problems created by the principality between 1594 and 1606. A double-headed eagle holding lightning bolts in claws hovers over a scene in which Rudolf II, figured as a Roman emperor, offers a crown to the naked Dacia wearing a mask unchanged. The other two masks are scattered at Dacia's feet along with a shield, weapons, a serpent, and Transylvanian captives, while under the emperor's feet lies the head of Andrew Báthory. It is probably copied after an engraving which circulated at that time. To the left of the painting, a covered and bearded figure holds Dacia in chains. He had been identified either with Andrew Báthory or the Papal Nuncio Germanico Malaspina, but his general appearance seems to suggest a portrait of Michael the Brave. There is a strong similarity with a famous engraving made in Prague by Egidius Sadler, another official artist, which Hans von Aachen must have known. In spite of some elements that would not plead in favor of the mentioned identification, the association with Michael the Brave is suggested not only by the similarity with Sadler's work, but also by the political context which followed Michael the Brave conquest of Transylvania. Like many of Hans von Aachen works of the Long War, the scene is an allegory that fully reflects the imperial discourse. If immediately after the battle Rudolf II and his advisor had no problem in adopting the explanation provided by Michael the Brave, very soon relations became strained as the Wallachian lord was suspected of lack of loyalty. The fact that the prince refused to abandon Transylvania and to deliver it to the emperor was considered as an act of usurpation. This would explain the thorny plant on which the bearded man keeps his hands, and also the chain which he controls Dacia. The thorny plant may also be an allusion to the Ottoman Empire, as it appears in a work by the painter and engraver Martin Rota, realized in 1572, probably, after the Battle of Lepanto. But whether or not we accept these associations, the gesture of the character keeping the naked woman in chains seems to allude to the illegitimacy of his action. His gesture is counterbalanced by the emperor, who generously hands the woman a royal crown. It can be assumed that the message of the work goes beyond the time of Schellenberg and includes allusions of what happened after 1599, when the episode of Michael rule in Transylvania ended with a revolt of the Hungarian nobility, supported by the imperial general Giorgio Basta. Soon afterwards, Transylvania rebelled once again, this time against the Habsburgs, a fact which menaced the balance of power in the conflict with the Porte. Two other works illustrating the battles of Guruslav and Brashov, also dedicated to were also dedicated to the difficulties created by Transylvania to the Habsburg camp. This one and this one. Both paintings focus on the trophies won by the imperial camp in those battles, and in which were carried in a solemn procession to the streets of imperial capital. The Capricorn, Rudolf II insignia, dominates the first scene, in which, according to the inscription, Dacia lies down conquered by the god and angel. Adeo et angelo Dacia de victa iacet. A goddess of victory, flanked by a lion, holds a balance in her left hand, and a Roman standard surmounted by a Habsburg double-headed eagle in her right, seemingly ignoring the defeated camp, represented by the female figure of Dacia, and a group of prisoners on the left of the painting. The negative connotation seems become even stronger in the painting depicting the Battle of Brashov, in which the Transylvanian prince Moses II was defeated and killed by the troops of the ruler of Wallachia, Radu Șerban. In Hans von Aachen painting, the participation of the Wallachian army is almost ignored, the confrontation being depicted as one of the Hercules, here, and the Hydra of Lerna. As the artist suggests, the triumph of the imperial camp seems unquestionable. The monster is chained, and its main head, the head of the prince Moses II, is impaled on a spear in front of the flag bearing the initials Z and Eb, Moses II. The lion is flanked by Hercules' favorite weapon, a club which has a mace and a palm leaf tied to it. A severed arm, here, is holding a torch pointing at the Hydra, while a woman, which may be identified with Transylvania, seems to look in sorrow at the lost flags on the head of Moses II. The participation of the Wallachian led by the Prince Radu Șerban is ignored unless the male figure here on the right of the painting, which his back turned towards the victory insignia, is a depiction of the aforementioned prince. The character looks more like a shepherd or a priest than a warrior, and if the identification is correct, the participation of the Wallachian seems to have once again a negative connotation. By contrast, it is worth mentioning that from the Wallachian perspective, as it was mirrored in the so-called Letopisețul Cantacuzinesc, Annals of the Cantacuzino family, ignores the Habsburg involvement in the battle, and presents the Battle of Brashov as one between a Christian prince, Radu Șerban, acting as a true anointed of God, trying to preserve peace at all costs, and a mad prince, Moses II, instigated by the devil, who rejected the beneficial peace proposal and called for prudence, and in the end received a well-deserved punishment. The divergent view of the same events was somehow to be expected, not only because different news and interpretations circulated on every military event during the conflict, but also because from the very beginning, the Christian camp was undermined by different interests and objectives. Hans von Aachen series, even if incompletely preserved, provides us with a fairly coherent overview of Rudolf II's discourse of the conflict, a war in which the emperor faced not only the Ottoman army, but also, from his point of view, the disloyalty of some Christian allies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much also for this interesting paper. And now we proceed with our next speaker, Delian Rusev from the Sofia University. The title of his paper is Whose Cup is This? Balkan Christians in the 16th Century Ottoman Miniature Art. So, the opposite perspective on the 16th century on the Balkans.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present it in this wonderful conference. And I'm shifting a little bit the topic towards Ottoman art, although during the same period. I need to admit in advance that I'm not an art historian, and my work is actually not primarily based on archival sources either, if we take the term in the narrow sense of private or official documents in the archives. But what has led me to this topic is my research on the image, but actually the narrative image of Ottoman Christians in Ottoman historical writing of the 15th and the 16th centuries. Let me start with a brief outline of the results of this previous research. So in the 15th and the 16th centuries, Muslim historical writing in the Ottoman domains, both at the court and in the popular realm, underwent rapid development, producing more than 100 works, many of them still unpublished or only known by their titles. During the same period, and particularly in the 15th century, Ottoman Christians, as we know, played a pivotal role in Ottoman state building, military and economy in various ways. As you surely know, they had the legal status of zimmi, or protected people, according to Sharia or Islamic law. However, they very rarely featured on the pages of the numerous historical histories of the Ottoman dynasty. Most historians completely avoided the topic, while others simply mentioned in passing the involvement of partly or entirely Christian militarized groups in the Ottoman army, such as the Voynuks or Martoloses, without discussing or even noting their non-Muslimness. The reasons for this historiographic obscurity were manifold. First, both the direct participation of Zimmis in the Muslim army and the forced levy of Zimmi youths, the Devshirme, the well-known Devshirme, which amounted to their Islamization and appropriation for state service, went against the Sharia norms and made Ottoman intellectuals uneasy to discuss such practices. Second, the historian's selective image of Ottoman history was largely based on the concept of Gaza or Holy War against the infidels, and hence the mass involvement of local unbelievers in this endeavor was difficult to fit into that ideological framework. And finally, of course, the large majority of Christians were part of the Reaya, or the productive tax-paying subjects, who generally remain on the margins of historical writing, with its focus on the elite and political affairs. A notable exception to this general trend is Idris Bitlisi, the author of a monumental history of the Ottoman dynasty, Hashdihist, or the Eight Paradises, written in Persian in the first 2 decades of the 16th century. For example, Bitlisi offers a detailed discussion of the origin, composition and functions of the Christian Voynuk corps, giving a very positive assessment of its role in Ottoman expansion. He was also the first Ottoman historian to attempt an explicit rationalization of the Devshirme, the child levy. One of the main reasons for his historiographic boldness is his first-hand observation of Balkan Christians. He was actually writing here in Sofia. And more important, however, is the fact that he was actually not an Ottoman. He was among the first wave of Persian emigres to the Ottoman domains, which followed the rise of the Shiite Safavids in Iran at the turn of the 16th century. He was surely a devout Muslim, but his expert imitation of the high Persian models of Ilkhanid and Timurid historiography made him more open to thematic experimentation. It is no surprise that his work was at first received unfavorably at the Ottoman court. But in later decades, actually, it became one of the most influential Ottoman dynastic histories in both its style and content. It was at the same time and under the same Persian influence, including the work of immigrant painters from Iran, that Ottoman miniature painting began its development. This development reached its peak in the second half of the 16th century when numerous illuminated manuscripts were produced at the Ottoman court in the office of the Sheikh Namejis, the first officially appointed historians. So this is a very well-known and actually unique depiction of the Devshirme from the Süleyman Name, a work composed in 1558. It's even on Wikipedia, the page for Devshirme. But not so well researched actually to my knowledge. I will not dwell on it here, but would like to point out again that this topic, the Devshirme, was basically a historiographic taboo, only broken by that time by Idris Bitlisi. It is possible that the miniature is a sign of the rethinking of the Devshirme evident in some late 16th century histories, which present it as a well-established practice and thus as something admissible in Islamic and dynastic law. However, it also highlights the fact that miniature art was considered a sphere which allowed for greater thematic and artistic liberty as compared to other fields of intellectual production, including historical writing per se. This will also become evident in the following examples of what I think are the images of Christians in Ottoman service, wearing a specific type of headgear. Just a note, I use cap, hat, and headgear interchangeably here. So Ottoman miniature painting has drawn increasing scholarly interest in recent decades. And I would only like to draw your attention to the latest study on this topic, the very good and excellent monograph, fresh from the printing press by Professor Mikov, who is by chance the next speaker. So, it's a very important contribution which basically summarizes and advances our knowledge in the field. I wouldn't say that I've been able to survey all the literature on Ottoman miniature painting because not all works were available to me, but those in those works available to me, I was unable to find a study specifically devoted to the depiction of Christian zimmis in Ottoman miniatures. And I'd like to stress that I'm speaking here about Christian zimmis, that is Ottoman subjects and not the Ottoman adversaries, which are of course often depicted on these images. Neither could I find a clear explanation of what this particular cap with 4 dangling ends denotes. It is well known that in pre-modern societies, clothing was an important and sometimes strictly regulated symbol of religious, social, and professional status. This is particularly true of headgear in the Ottoman society. So far, however, I was also unable to find archival evidence of this particular cap and its possible attribution to a specific social or professional group. So I have based my analysis here mainly on visual material. Most of my examples come from the Hünername, the Book of Talents or the Book of Merits, completed in the 1580s by the Sheikh Nameji Seyd Lokman and several miniaturists. The work contains short biographies and miniatures of Ottoman rulers with a focus on their qualities, hobbies, characters, etc. Hunting was certainly among the Sultan's hobbies, and several miniatures depict hunting scenes in which falconers take a prominent place. It is curious, however, is that some falconers wear a typical Muslim turban, while others have the cap in question. So you see here in the middle the figure of apparently Muslim falconer, and then on both sides here these young men who are wearing the strange cap in question. So there are many such examples, mostly from the Hünername, but also from other works. Here in the second volume of the work, we see again these dignitaries actually who participate in the Sultan's hunt. And we again see both apparently Muslim falconers and such that are maybe also Muslim, but maybe not, wearing this hat. It should be said that there are many different types of falconers at the Ottoman court and throughout the empire, so it is possible that the distinctive hat was not necessarily bound to a different ethnic, religious, or whatever provenance. So here again, in some cases, we only see these type of falconers, and sometimes people wearing a similar type of hat perform also other auxiliary duties during hunting, as you see, even as active hunters or bearing the prey and so on and so forth. And these are here just talking and observing the scene. So we don't know exactly what their function was in this case. Why I think that these people might have been Christian is another miniature which is only preserved as a detached folio in the collection of Edward Binney, and I only have this copy from his publication of the paintings in his manuscripts. But we see here clearly the same type of hat being worn by a groom, by an imperial groom. Probably this was also a part of a hunting. It's obviously a part of the hunting scene. So we know very well from archival sources, first, that there were both in the Balkans at least, and probably also in Anatolia, both Christian and Muslim falconers. This profession was spread across the religious boundaries, but this person here is almost without doubt a Voynuk. These were this group of originally soldiers, as the name itself indicates, of Balkan provenance, who in the 15th century took active part in the Ottoman military, in Ottoman warfare. But in the 16th century, most of them remained in the service of imperial grooms. So they worked in the stables of the imperial stables in Istanbul, Edirne and Plovdiv, Filibe. And most of them by that time in the 16th century came from central and eastern Bulgaria, basically, and today's western Bulgaria. But in the Western Balkans, their number diminished in the 16th century, because most of those people there were actually involved in warfare. So I think that in this case, because Voynuks were exclusively Christian, I think that it is safe to assume that this hat was something worn by Christians, and we can make this conclusion based on the examples that I've shown so far, but other examples make the picture more complicated. Like, for example, here we have a just standing page or courtier during. We have a couple of such examples of court ceremonies or entertainment events, like in this case, a beast fight in front of the Sultan. So we don't know what the function of this person here is. Also, a similar, although maybe not the same type of hat, is depicted in for Ottoman musketeers or riflemen on several occasions. And we see here during the conquest of a Christian settlement in Thrace, it's very anachronistic, the depiction, but we see that the Christians themselves who were captured do not wear this same type of hat, but different headgear. Also, this is from a 17th century work. We see again a similar hat for Ottoman artillerymen, Ottoman gunmen. So that's the Battle of Hotin in 1621. So the question arises of whether this was a cap that designated a certain ethnic or rather religious status, or rather a certain professional status within the Ottoman army, maybe, and the elite. I cannot give a definitive answer, but where what I think gives us here is also another picture of the court. So we also see people with this type of hat or similar types of hats. What can give us some idea, I think, is the works of European artists, travelers who either described the costumes of local people in a narrative ways or depicted them. So I've found a couple of examples here from a famous travelogue, or rather diary of Hans Derensbaum in 1553, when he visits a village which is border zone between Serbian and Bulgarian, whatever that meant exactly at that time, territory. He says that this village, Belica or Velice, was a Bulgarian village, but however only Serbians now live there. Their dress is not typically Bulgarian, but then when he describes certain aspects of their dress, he goes on to say that their headwear is made of coarse cloth, slit open at the front and the back. So basically something very similar to that what is depicted in the miniatures. And we have more explicit examples. Okay, thank you. Solomon Schweiger, who actually passed through the Balkans exactly at the same time that the Huneername was produced in the 1580s, sorry. He depicts a Bulgarian couple. That's how he calls them, a Bulgarian woman and a Bulgarian man. And we see the same, a very similar type of hat here. Other examples are also available. That's a German also album of the time, where by probably Heinrich Hendrovsky, where we see again Bulgarian peasants, literally what he says, who wear this type of a similar type of hat. And also the problem here is that he also on the previous page depicts Ottoman gun masters and riflemen, Ottoman gunmen basically, and we see that it's a very similar also headwear, although not exactly the same, but still resembles it apart from the color and some small details like the feather on top. So then again, we also have here Louis Deye in the 1620s, who depicts when passing through Bulgaria. In his words, he depicts local, a very ridiculous, as he calls it, headwear of a Bulgarian or a local Christian man. So I think that that what this evidence from the Western sources can give us is the clear conclusion that this was a typical headwear worn by local peasants. Whether these were only Bulgarian or also Serbian is something that I still cannot say. Maybe more systematic study of evidence for other regions. I've seen some depictions of Greek peasants which do not have this hat, but that's not conclusive in my, because Greek could have meant also Orthodox simply, and it requires a more systematic study of European material. Whether there was certain ethnic specificity is something still open to debate. And obviously, through such Christian, mainly or partly Christian servicemen in Ottoman service, this kind of headgear also entered the palace and the close circle of the of the Sultan. So by way of conclusion, I would also like to address the question of why these painters, the Ottoman painters, dared to reproduce, to depict Christian servants of the Sultan. I mean, the answer could be obvious. Obviously, they were there, so they would depict them. But they could have well chosen to omit them, like many historians did in their narratives. I think that here we have a very clear, I mean, if we search for a certain ideological background, first we see that miniature art was, as I said, freer or less limited by its generic specific by the conventions of the genre, so they could depict more things that were either otherwise not very popular. And I think if we search for an ideological background, we can see that these the presence of non-Muslims in the court or the military is kind of a it shows the supra-confessional authority of the Sultan, and I think that this idea is very closely related to the idea of adalet, of equity and justice, which was supposed to be a central pillar of sultanic authority. And this was also a discourse that entered Ottoman historical writing through, and not only historical writing, Ottoman intellectual life through Persian, mainly Persian mediation of such Middle Eastern ideas of justice, as well studied by Linda Darling, for example, and many other historians. So just to okay, no, okay. So I just wanted to show the final image, which really explicitly reinforces this idea. This is again from the Hünername, the Sultan Mehmed I hunting near Rushchuk or Ruse, today's Ruse. And a certain soldier is supposed to have stolen the honey of local villagers, local peasants. And then the Sultan, by a clever device, found out who the soldiers were, and then he punished them and made them repay the stolen honey. So this is, again, these miniatures were, this miniature was created, and the text that accompanies is at a time when justice was a very hot topic in Ottoman society, and at the end of the 16th century, and there was a perceived decline exactly because of the lack of justice, and I think this was meant as a kind of a mirror for princes, as a depiction of the ideal ruler, and Christians had limited but important part in this message in this case. And of course, just to have the archival aspect, we see this throughout the Ottoman documents, this exactly idea of the Sultan's justice applied through the petitioning process. And this is another, just in the court records of Ruse, of Rushchuk, a case where local officials were abusing their power and overtaxing the population, including on beehives, taxes on beehives, and the Sultan ordered this practice to be stopped. Fortunately, there was no historian or miniaturist to show us how the case developed afterwards. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you indeed. No, thank you. Time. It was interesting. Now we proceed to our next speaker, Professor Lubomir Mikov, who will speak on angels in Islamic miniature painting. I think his paper will be delivered in Bulgarian.
Моят доклад е на български. За сега не е известно колко точно ангели се срещат в културата и изкуството на исляма. Със сигурност обаче може да се каже, че те са културно-историческа проекция на ангелите от юдеизма и християнството. В Корана има повече от 80 знамения, в които се споменават всякакви ангели. Това най-вероятно е основната предпоставка, един от 6 принципи на вярата да е свързан именно с тяхното почитане. Ангелите в исляма съставляват 2 основни групи – висши и нисши. Висшите ангели съответстват на архангелите в християнството и са също 7 на брой, но само 4 от тях притежават имена. Това са Джабраил, Микаил, Азраил и Исрафил. Имена притежават и много други ангели, по-известни между които са Марут и Харут, т.е. паднали ангели. Малик – пазач на рая, Ридван – пазач на ада, почтените записвачи Атит, Ракиб и други. Ангелите стават популярни в ислямската миниатюрна живопис в началото на 14 век. Въвеждането им в ислямската иконографска схема се осъществява от персийската миниатюра, а в османската миниатюрна традиция те вече са масово възпроизвеждани. Появата на ангелите в ислямската миниатюра е под влияние на византийската живописна традиция. В повечето писмени източници се изтъква, че ангелите са същества с 4 крила, но на практика те са изобразявани най-често двукрили. Такива са почти всички ангели, включени в арабската, персийската и османската миниатюра. Арабска миниатюра. Арабската миниатюра се поражда през втората половина на 12 век и се развива до началото на 14 век. Изображенията на ангели през двата периода на нейното съществуване са твърде малко. Въпреки това обаче ангелските изображения в арабската миниатюра не липсват, а някои от тях се отличават и с определена художествена стойност. Такъв, например, е случаят с изображението на архангел Исрафил. Тук ли? Въпреки че тази миниатюра е възприета за арабска, тя е създадена под силното влияние на персийската миниатюра, която в края на 14 век вече съдържа доста изображения на Исрафил. Безспорна индикация за персийското влияние в художественото решение на Исрафил в арабската миниатюра е неговата чалма или съръка. Тя е нарисувана с навивки около висок иконосовиден калпак и като цяло не е характерна за арабския мъжки костюм, но е типична за костюма на персийците, а в последствие и на османците, сред които е известна с персийското название терпуш. Известни са още 2 миниатюри с ангели. На едната от тях са изобразени 2 ангела, един срещу друг, държайки в дясната си ръка писалка, а в лявата свитък. Те не са назовани, но са лесно разпознаваеми по реквизитите, с които са свързани. От тях се разбира, че изобразените ангели са Атит и Ракит от групата на почтените записвачи, които са записвали делата на хората. С арабските миниатюри се поставя началото в развитието на ислямската живописна традиция, поради което тяхното възпроизвеждане е осъществено на случайен принцип и предимно в ограничена тематична рамка. Персийска миниатюра. Силен тласък в развитието на ислямската живопис дава персийската миниатюра, която се развива в продължение на малко повече от 6 века. Тя се поражда по времето на Илханата, монголско ханство, основано през 13 век. Тогава е отворено и първото в Персия дворцово китаб-хане. Дворцовите китаб-ханета функционирали едновременно като библиотеки и работилници за преписване и декорация на ръкописни сборници с луксозен дизайн. Монголското нашествие в Персия е свързано с преселването на много китайски миниатюристи, чието творчество е намерило голямо отражение върху местните персийски художници, поради което миниатюрите им придобили еклектичен характер. Персийската живописна традиция залязва в началото на 20 век, по времето на династията на каджарите, при която европейските влияния са станали неотменна компонента на персийската миниатюра. През целия период на своето съществуване персийската миниатюра е била под силно влияние на китайско-монголската изобразителна традиция. Въпреки това, персийската миниатюра се отличава и с въвеждане на собствена стилистика и традиция, голяма роля за които играе приноса на такива изявени декоратори-миниатюристи като Бейзат и Абаси. Известно е, че най-ранните легенди за Мирадж са включени в илханитски анонимен сборник Мирадж Нама или Книга на Възнесението. В сборника е отбелязано, че чудесното пътешествие на Мухамед до Мека, от Мека до седмото небе и обратно, е станало с помощта на фантастичното животно Бурак и с посредничеството на архангел Джебраил. В миниатюрите на сборника Мирадж Нама, както и в редица други миниатюри на тази тема, ролята на Бурак като фантастично животно, което Мухамед е обязал по време на Мираджа, се изпълнява от архангел Джебраил, носещ върху раменете си пророка. Сред многото миниатюри с подобно решение има и една изобразяваща пристигането на Мухамед върху раменете на Джебраил пред изумрудената порта на първото небе, където го посреща друг ангел. Забележителното в тази миниатюра е изобразяването на пророка с открито лице, специално подчертавам, с открито лице, с късо подстригана брада и с коса, сплетена на две плитки. Прави впечатление, че в миниатюрите към сборника, наречен Парижки, ангел Джебрил е подменен с фантастичното животно Бурак при преходите на Мухамед до седмото небе. На една от тези миниатюри е изобразен пророкът Ибрахим, седящ на изумруден зелен трон. Тази миниатюра ангел Джебраил е само съпътстваща фигура, с което се подчертава неговата медиаторска функция между Аллах и пророците. Това е отразено и в други миниатюри в парижкия ръкопис. Ето още един пример. Тук отново Мухамед е с открито лице върху Бурак. В сравнение с Микаил, който почти не е изобразяван в ислямската миниатюра, ангел Исрафил, т.е. предвестникът на съдния ден, е един от любимите на персийските декоратори-миниатюристи от 16 век. По това време той е изобразяван като младеж с лице луна, т.е. тип махру, което означава окръглено лице, бадемови очи и изключени вежди. Персийско-илханитската изобразителна традиция махру има китайски огузки произход. Освен това, някои фигури на Исрафил са рисувани с 4 крила, едно стъпало и с тръба, притежаваща 7 фунии. Една от най-важните особености на персийската миниатюра е доминирането на религиозните сюжети в нея. Фокусирането на персийските декоратори-миниатюристи предимно върху разработването на религиозни теми означава на практика и много специално отношение към ангелите в ислямската доктринална традиция. В резултат на това, напълно естествено и обяснимо, е включването на ангелските персонажи в персийската миниатюра, възпроизвеждаща както коранични събития, така и най-разнообразни народни мюсюлмански схващания. Османска миниатюра. Към средата на 15 век или по времето на султан Мехмед II, Фатих, се поражда османската миниатюра, която бележи забележителен ръст на развитие до края на 18 век, когато попада под силното влияние на западноевропейската естетика и предимно на френския барок. Османската миниатюра се отличава с много широк тематичен обхват, както и с редица стилови и иконографски иновации. Основните тематични кръгове, разработени в османската миниатюра, са военно дело, религия, бит, делници и празници, любов, еротика и секс, грехопадение, прегрешения, фантастични животни и птици, портрети и портретуване. В повечето миниатюри на религиозна тематика са включени изображенията на отделни ангели. Най-често изобразяван е архангел Джебраил. В миниатюра от времето на султан Селим I е изобразена сцена, за която се смята, че ангел Джебраил поднася купа с храна на пророците Адам и Иса или Исус. Това обаче е спорно, защото ангелът отговаря за прехраната на хората и за плодородието на земята не е Джебраил, а е Микаил. Пророкът Иса е изобразяван и в други миниатюри. Интересно е художественото решение на неговия образ в една миниатюра, на която два ангела свалят от небето Иса и го поставят върху балкона на едно минаре. С изобразяването на Иса или Исус върху балкона на минарето, което по формален белег е османско, художникът всъщност възпроизвежда фигурата на пророка на мястото, заемано от петека и коляфа, т.е. конструктивни елементи в горната част на минарето, които са увенчавани с салем, представляващ емблемата на исляма. От тук следва изводът, че вероятно в случая Иса е изобразен като един от символите на исляма. В османската миниатюра ангел Джебраил е свързван и с други пророци, предимно с Юнус и Ибрахим. Литературната основа на миниатюрата с изображение на Юнус е изложена в Корана. Миниатюрата, възпроизвеждаща този текст, е наречена Джибрил изважда Юнус от стомаха на кит. Тук Джибрил е представен с две крила и в ситуация, в която изважда Юнус от паста на кит с две ръце. Подобни сцени се срещат и в християнското изкуство у нас, които навсякъде и винаги са възпроизвеждани като илюстрация на идеята за възкресението. В ислямското изкуство обаче сцената с Исус е илюстрация на идеята за възнаграденото покаяние. Сред многобройните османски миниатюри има и такива, в които се възпроизвеждат сцени с пророка Ибрахим. Той е един от най-обичаните от мюсюлманските пророци, който се споменава в Корана 69 пъти в 25 сури. Това е и пророкът, свързан с преустройството на светилището Кааба. Особено популярен сред мюсюлманския свят е наративът за готовността на Ибрахим да жертва един от своите синове, за да докаже верността си към Аллах. Този жест на Ибрахим е посрещнат от Аллах възторжено, поради което той е изпратил ангел Джибрил с един овен, за да подмени с него жертвата. Една от миниатюрите, свързани с сюжета Ибрахимова жертва, е включена в историческото съчинение Османска история на Сита Локман. Фигурите на Ибрахим, на сина му Исмаил и на ангел Джибрил с жертвения овен са разположени в горната част на миниатюрата, а в долната част е изобразен цар Немруд, за когото в легендите се разказва, представете си, че воювал с Аллах, както и че бил враг на Ибрахим, поради което направил опит да го изгори, но с намесата на Аллах огънят се превърнал във вода, а въглищата в риби. Посочените сведения за Немруд не съответстват на включения в миниатюрата му образ. Той е представен с достолепна и благовидна осанка, а цялата му фигура е оградена в сърцевидна рамка, която пък е обхваната от пламъците на свещена аура. Това означава, че съответният миниатюрист не е имал никаква представа за неговите злодеяния, както и за профила му на богохулец. В анонимен сборник от 1600-1610 година е включена миниатюра, на която е изобразена фигурата на архангел Исрафил. Това означава, че този ангел е придобил популярност и сред османските турци. Нарисуван е с две крила, с дълга роба и корона на главата, както и с задължителния му атрибут сур, название на тръбата, с която е възвестявал часа на съдния ден. Сред публикуваните османски миниатюри се среща и една с така наречените паднали ангели, т.е. с изображенията на ангелите Харут и Марут, които се появили по времето на пророка Сюлейман. За нея се пояснява, че Харут и Марут са изобразени в кладенец, където ще останат с главата надолу до деня на страшния съд. Техният основен грях бил, че разпространявали тайната на магьосничеството сред хората. За разлика от шейтаните, които правили същото, Харут и Марут предупреждавали хората, че всеки, който иска да научи и практикува магия, ще получи посмъртно наказание. Въпреки това обаче, те не били умилостивени от Всевишния. В една османска миниатюра е изобразена сцена, в която архангел Джибрил се среща с Мухамед. Тук Джибрил е представен с 4 крила, с ръце в молитвен жест и с корона. За разлика от персийските миниатюри от периода на илханидите, в които Мухамед е носен или съпровождан от Джибрил предимно в контекста на темата Мирадж, в османската миниатюра срещата на архангела и пророка става на земята. Това е първата композиционна особеност в османската миниатюра. Втората новост е изображението на самия пророк. Той е обграден с рамка, представляваща михрабоподобна ниша. Освен това е представен с бял вуал на лицето и с ореол от пламъци над главата. Докато с включването на фигурата на пророка в михрабоподобната ниша е израз на идеята за неговата свещена неприкосновеност, то представянето му с закрито лице следва идеята на Аллах, записана в Корана, а именно: той е изначалният и безкрайният, и явният и скритият. Той всяко нещо знае. От тук следва, че османските художници са възприели пратеника на Аллах сред хората на земята като явен и скрит, т.е. като захир и батин, с което се демонстрира идеята за двойствената природа на Мухамед, съчетаваща в неразривно единство човешката и божествената същност. С това османското портретуване на пророка се различава от персийското, при което, следвайки китайски фигурални образи или модели, той е изобразяван с открито лице, притежаващо късо подстригана брада, както и коса сплетена на 2 плитки. Подобно на всяка ритуална маска, така и вуалът пред лицето на Мухамед прави видимото невидимо, или по-точно казано, превръща видимото в друго качество. Ритуалната маска принася нейния носител от една в друга видима реалност. Индикация за това са антропоморфните или зооморфните елементи в морфологията на маската, които са знаци за въвеждане в обращение на култа към най-различни тотемни същества. Вуалът пред лицето на Мухамед е глазът, дюс. Той е без каквато и да е морфология. Това превръща пророка от видима в невидима личност. Но тази невидимост в случая води до промяна на личностния статус, до подмяна на човешкия с божествения статус по подобие на Аллах, който освен изначален е и невидим за хората. Ето защо вуалът пред лицето на Мухамед е висш израз на святост, предел на неговата свещена невидимост. Лицето е основен идентификационен атрибут на човешката самоличност. Неговото заличаване означава на практика лишаване от човешка идентичност. Това означава също и възможност самоличността да придобие друг статус. Случаят с пророка Мохамед е точно такъв. Закриване на лицето му е знак за неговото схващане като човек от друга реалност, като трансцендентна фигура в сферата на божественото, като реален и едновременно ирационален образ, като съвместяване на човек и Бог. В заключение може да се каже, че следвайки посланията на Корана и наративната традиция, свързана с него, мюсюлманските миниатюристи създават галерии от образи на ангели, които са посредници между Аллах, пророците и хората. От друга страна обаче, докато посланията на Корана имат ограничен отзвук и битието на мюсюлманите, миниатюрната живопис, създавана през вековете, е била винаги и навсякъде непозната за мюсюлманските общности. Тази живопис се характеризира с интровертен характер и по своята същност е елитарно изкуство. Миниатюрната живопис е създавана да илюстрира различни по съдържание кодекси, поръчвани от представители на властовите елити по места и са строго съхранявани в техните лични библиотеки, които са били недостъпни за обикновения мюсюлманин. Поради това мюсюлманите по света не са имали никакъв достъп до живописните реплики на кораничните послания. В това именно се състои и голямата разлика между миниатюрната живопис в исляма и християнското изкуство през средновековието и българското възраждане. Благодаря ви за вниманието.
Thank you, Professor Mikov. And now we proceed to our final paper in this session, which will be the paper of Miglena Prashkova. She will deliver it in Bulgarian, I think. So the English title is Tracing of an Iconostasy set from Sevlievo. Please, Professor Prashkova, the floor is yours.
Много благодаря, както за поканата, така и за прекрасната организация, на вас, организаторите. Ще се опитам да бъда по-кратка.
Много благодаря.
Текстът е много дълъг, затова малко по-набързо. Така. Повод за настоящия доклад са две реставрационни проучвания, които направих преди няколко години във връзка с изготвянето на проекти за реставрация на художествените ценности в двата храма, които виждате на екрана. Енорийската църква Света Троица в Севлиево и църквата Въведение Богородично в Батошевския девически манастир. Виждате и разликата в построяването на двата храма, но тъй като нищо на този свят не е случайно, не е случайно и това, че се наложи да ги изготвя по едно и също време. А иначе реалното проучване всъщност стана едва след като преди няколко месеца направихме реставрацията на иконите в Батошевския девически манастир, което провокира едно по-задълбочено проучване. Виждате на екрана 5 икони, които се наложи да бъдат основно реставрирани. Разбира се, и другите бяха реставрирани, които виждате в иконостаса. Ще спомена само, че царския ред икони, празничния ред икони и кръста всъщност принадлежат категорично на един иконостасен комплект, който вероятно е бил създаден за първоначалния иконостас на храма, а през 2000-та година, когато не преработват, а направо правят нова олтарна преграда в храма на девическия манастир в Батошево, Вероятно на втория ред са монтирани и тези доста големи по размер икони, на 4 от които е автор Станислав Доспевски. Една от тях, която Полилея закрива, е практически на Цаньо Захариев Млади. Всичко започна от там, че при първоначалното проучване се задоволих само с литературата, която познавах. И тук ще цитирам точно текста на Асен Василиев. През 1871 година на Станислав Доспевски било възложено да нарисува иконостасните икони в новопостроената църква Света Троица в Севлиево. Той изпълнил поръчката. През 1871-72 година е нарисувал иконите на светците Никола с размери, Спиридон, размери, Иван Рилски, пророк Даниил, тримата светители, свети Илия с подпис, писа Станислав Д. 1871, Григорий Богослов и Иван Златоуст и Иван Кръстител. По-късно тези икони били свалени от иконостаса и сменени с посредствени икони. От иконите на Станислав Доспевски първите 5 сега се намират на балкона на църквата, а последните 3 са пренесени в девическия манастир в село Батошево, гдето се пазят и днес. Ясно е вече, че практически една неточност има с иконата на светиите братя Кирил и Методий, която Асен Василиев определя като икона на двамата литургисти. Причината за това вероятно е, че тези икони не са били на иконостаса, иначе изследователя щеше да забележи, че са 4, а не 3. И тежкото състояние на живописта, благодарение на което той реално не е могъл да преотчете сигнатурите в иконите. След малко ще видите и защо са били така. Ето това е живописта, състоянието и преди реставрация. И за да съкратя една част, ще кажа само, че архивните документи, които потърсих, уточниха само, че църквата в Батошевския манастир е построена през 1905 година и осветена през 1909 година. Никакви други документи не намерихме, затова се опитахме да изясним нещата с архивните документи, които се съхраняват в Държавния архив Габрово и засягат документацията на енорийския храм Света Троица в Севлиево. Иконите са в много тежко състояние. Съвсем набързо ще кажа, че много накъсана живопис, може би благодарение на вложените материали, маслата, които употребява Станислав Доспевски, вероятно заради секативите, които добавя вътре. Знаят колегите реставратори, че пигментните смеси, които се използват, винаги влияят по различен начин на маслата и вероятно заради тези вложени материали са станали и тези ужасни разрушения, които затрудняват и разчитането на надписите в иконите. Ние се опитахме при реставрацията да реинтегрираме тая живопис, така че те да могат да се върнат отново в култова употреба. И на екрана виждате един момент от етап от работата на нас реставраторите, когато трябваше да се ретушира така накъсаната живопис, че да могат да излязат буквените знаци от подписа на зографа. Станислав Д. 1870 го виждате. И тук на помощ дойдоха архивите. Един протокол на църковното настоятелство от 1908 година гласи, че, цитирам, да се подарят на игуменката на Батошевския девически манастир за църквата им иконите Исус Христов, свети Иван Предтеча, свети Архангел Михаил, свети пророк Илия, свети Никола, свети Кирил и Методий и 3 светители, които икони са заменени с ново и имат нужда от такива в църквата им. Какво всъщност се случва? Богата архива на църквата Света Троица съвсем ясно се казва в летописната книга, изготвена от протоерея подписал този протокол. Той е свидетел на всички тия събития от края на 19 век, защото пише летописната книга през 1933 година. И всъщност той много красноречиво казва, че автора на иконостаса е дядо Добри Марангушчията от Горна Оряховица, който прави иконостаса едва през 1897-98 година, а автори на иконите са двамата братя, на които е възложена работата, апостол Христов и брат му Епифаний, или както е записан в документацията от Пефе или Петър, фигурира като име, и допълва тази информация Асен Василиев с Овенти Исачев, който всъщност е техен братовчет. Практически те са автори на стенописите и на иконите на сегашния иконостас. Тезата, че по-рано е имало стар иконостас в църквата Света Троица в Севлиево, очевидно трябва да бъде отхвърлена, тъй като протоиерей Поп Рафаилов казва, че такъв е бил изработен едва в края на 19 век и Феликс Канец при посещението си в Севлиево практически допуска грешка, като казва, че и във вехтата и в новата църква иконостасите са украсени с прекрасна дърворезба. Той категорично казва, че всъщност първият иконостас за храма е изработен едва в края на 19 век. Това вероятно се е наложило точно защото иконите на Станислав Доспевски вече са били повредени. Вероятно тези повреди, които преди малко показах, са станали много скоро след тяхното изработване и едва 20 години по-късно се е наложило да бъдат заменени. И въпреки всичко в църквата Света Троица се съхраняват още няколко негови икони. Това са на тримата светители, която се намира на северния проскинитарий, на свети Спиридон, която е свободно стояща в наоса, на свети Йоан Рилски, също свободно стояща, виждате, в доста тежко състояние се намира. За сега не може да се каже дали имат надписи авторски, тъй като са в доста тежко състояние, много замърсени, с много накъсана живопис. На Света Троица коронясва Света Богородица върху иконостаса в южния параклис на храма, на свети пророк Даниил в северния край на иконостаса, в този параклис също, и още една икона на Цаньо Захариев Млади, Света Богородица, която носи всички стилови характеристики на иконата на Исус Христос, която видяхте от Батошевския девически манастир. Оказва се, че практически Асен Василиев споменава 8 икони, но те са много повече и предвид това, че иконите върху сегашния иконостас са 14, ние допуснахме, че може би към този иконостасен комплект има още икони. И тъй като, както казах, нищо никога не е случайно, точно по времето на нашата работа, нашия колега Стевко Аенски работи върху други две икони, които се намират в фонда на художествената галерия Христо Цокев в Габрово. Виждате, че размерите на едната икона Светия Атанасий са идентични с тези, които показах преди малко. А Благовещението е с малко по-малки размери. Очевидно става дума за има още икони от този иконостасен комплект. За сега не сме намерили тази на Светия Архангел Михаил, която е спомената в протокола на църковното настоятелство. Иначе на екрана виждате така основните изводи, които направих. Ще кажа само, че практически най-чудното е защо двамата зоографи, Тревненския и Самоковския, се озовават да работят за един иконостасен комплект. И тук само ще кажа, като спестя основната информация за двамата зоографи, че след завръщане... поръчки за изпълнение на икони Станислав Доспевски получава от различни краища на България, от Щип до Тулча. Рисувала икони за Цариград, работи в района на Централна Северна България. През 1864 година рисува за църквата Благовещение в Преображенския манастир край Търново. Между другото, там се намират едни прекрасни негови икони, технически изключително добре изпълнени, не в такова състояние, в което намерихме тези. В Преображенския манастир той работи с тревненски зографи и резбари. Вероятно оттам идва и връзката с тях. Тук трябва да спомена обаче, че сътрудничеството на двамата, тревненския зограф и на Доспевски, реално идва няколко години по-рано, когато те работят в църквата Успение Богородично в Габрово през 1867 година. Каква е причината за това сътрудничество е доста трудно да се каже, но от литературата е известно, че и двамата споделят едни и същи революционни идеи, участват в освободителната борба. Възможно е познанството им да датира от предишните години, защото в Северна Добруджа Цаньо Захариев работи с баща си между 1862 и 1866 година и то основно в района на Тулча, а в града, в църквата Свети Георги, има икони на Станислав Доспевски, които са работени между 1864 и 1874 година. Неговото творчество е така доста добре проучено и документи доста има свързани с неговата биография, но така или иначе сътрудничеството на тревненските и на самоковските зографи в Преображенския манастир също може би е причина за това. И така оказва се, че за сега от този иконостасен комплект имаме 11 големи по формат икони, които са били работени за църквата Света Троица в Севлиево, но никога не са били монтирани на иконостас. 10 от тях са еднакви по размер. Едната, вероятно, е била предназначена за проскинитари. Към същия комплект принадлежат и двете икони на Цаньо Захариев, млади, уточнявам, който работи иконите на Христос и Богородица. 5 икони от този комплект са пренесени през 1908 година в Батошевския девически манастир, от многото икони, наредени върху стасидиите в наоса на Севлиевската църква, 2 се отличават – Успение Богородично и Свети 40 мъченици, които имат еднакви размери – 49 на 38 малки, значително по-малки от тези. Стиловете и техническите им характеристики ги отнасят към творчеството на Захариевската фамилия, възможно също на Цаньо Захариев. Може да се допусне, че тревненският образописец е бил ангажиран с изписването на празничен ред икони за храма, които са или не са изпълнени, или не са съхранени, а е възможно и да са пренесени в друг храм. Благодаря ви.
Thank you very much for your paper, Professor Parashkova. Now, dear colleagues, this was due to several reasons, most eclectic session in our conference, and I really deeply thank all the participants. I deliberately didn't cut the time of their papers because the things that they presented were really interesting, and now I would propose to cut the discussion because we are just 2 ahead of time. And excuse me, but I prefer for all the participants to have a bit of break before our next session. And I, of course, suggest that you continue informal discussion in outside, please. Thank you very much to all of you.
Само за секунда, Нещо, което пропуснахте, като последния слайд не пуснах. Изключително съм благодарна на колегите си реставратори, с които работих върху този проект. На екрана виждате техните имена: Румяна Дечева, Светла Граданска, Кристин Димитрова, Панайот Панов, Емил Чушев и Стевко Еенски. Това беше много тежка работа заради тези кошмарни разрушения на иконите на Станислав Досов. Благодаря ви. Понеже са и тук.